Good afternoon, good evening. This is Tony Young. I'm the president of RISE San Diego, and we really appreciate you being a part of our webinar focusing on child welfare and how it is impacted by COVID-19. We've been doing these webinars for the last maybe month and a half, and we've talked about all types of issues, but one that is we think is most important is the one that we're going to talk about today, focusing on COVID-19 and how it impacts our youth. And there's all kinds of different ways that could happen. So we're very happy for you to be here. RISE San Diego focuses on leadership, urban leadership, civic engagement, which is what we're doing tonight, and support of nonprofits. And we're going to continue to do that. And please get on our website to find out more about our organization. The individuals who are going to be participating today, we have Ramona Mercan, who's from the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. Marissa Bejarano, San Diego District Attorney's Office. Jordan Harrison with Reality Changers. Anthony Medina with People's Legal Services. And our moderator will be Dr. Zachary Green, who is the lead RISE faculty member and also a faculty member at USD. So again, thank you for being a part of this, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Zachary Green.
Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate that. What we're going to be focusing on, as Tony alluded to, is the whole question of child welfare. And then specifically in terms of child welfare, the kinds of things that we're learning in terms of where are we in terms of the abuse of children, the neglect of them, social emotional learning, aspects of the courts, programming, all those kinds of things we're going to explore. But in order to do that, we want to give you some idea of what we tend to do in these webinars. So we're going to put up a slide to give you an indication of the kinds of norms that we usually use. So what we want is that all attendees, if you could be muted, that way we will be able to hear you through the question and answer and through the chat. Make sure that you use those. We'll be about 15 minutes into the session, and then we'll begin to attend to what it is that you are inquiring about. We will not be using the raise the hand or audio at any point in this process. And please know that this webinar is recorded. And so if after the fact there are things that you learned in this that you would really like to share with others, we have that. And also please know that you can really follow us in terms of social media. And if there are things that you would like to tweet about at RISE San Diego, we'd appreciate that, and hashtag Rise Now, which is this process. So the way that we start is to get some sense of where you are with these issues. And so we would like to offer you a poll, and then we're going to do the introduction of our panel. So here is your poll. In terms of your perceptions of the needs of children and youth in urban San Diego, which of the following do you believe are most important to address? So feel free to check the ones that you believe are most important, and we'll be looking at those results. And as we look at those results, then we'll also be introducing the panel, and we'll begin our conversation. So let's engage you first, and you have about a minute. Feel free to respond. Take another 30 seconds. And we'll leave it there. Okay, let's see what our poll says. Okay, what we see is that wow, these numbers are high in almost every area. So the first part that we see is that children and youth are experiencing high volumes of stress, excessive worry, or sadness, unhealthy eating or sleeping habits, and difficulty with attention. And then we also see a very strong response. Children and youth are facing major disruptions in learning and support traditionally provided by childcare, school, and community-based organizations. We also see that children, like their caretakers, are stuck at home with economic insecurity and limited access to food, medical, and mental health care. And also very strong is there are fewer reporting of the calls of child abuse, but that doesn't mean that these issues are not there. So at this point, we'd like to introduce you to the panel, and these are the areas that you want to focus on, and we're ready to begin to explore those. So, hello panelists, open your mics, please. Thank you. Open your cameras, and let's begin. What I would like you to each do is introduce yourself with your full name and the role that you have, and then give that 1 minute about what do you think is the most important thing in terms of issues of child welfare that we need to consider. Let's go with Ramona first, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ramona Mershon. I'm a Children's Services Administrator with the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. In regards to issues we really need to look at, these are difficult times for all of us right now. And while many of us may have a supportive home, many children in our community, particularly marginalized and vulnerable communities, are going through very difficult times. And this is a new normal and reality for them. So we need to be looking at abuse that's going on in the homes. The calls that are coming into our hotline and law enforcement agencies have been reduced significantly, about 50%. These are homes where domestic violence, mental health, substance abuse could still be occurring and is occurring, but it's invisible to those of us who could help.
Thank you very much. That gives us a quick overview that even though the calls have reduced, these issues are still very much present, and that's something that we're going to want to explore further. Let's hear from Jordan Harrison. What do you see is really at issue in terms of child welfare?
Perfect. Good evening, and thank you for having me, Dr. Green. It's Jordan Harrison, Senior Director of Programs here at Reality Changers. And the work, particularly working with students and families, is exactly what Ramona was talking about, really looking at how that stresses, the students are taking that on. I have a lot of students currently that are trying to get jobs or working, and that money is going right to their families to figure out how to help out and pay bills, and really look at how this trauma isn't just impacting the student, but the entire family, and how then the students are embodying that and trying to manage alongside with that.
So you're saying that it's not just the children, but it also has an impact on the family. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And then Anthony.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Medina. I am an attorney here in San Diego, founder of People's Legal Services, a sliding scale nonprofit law firm. The overwhelming majority of the work that we do is in family law cases. And I think piggybacking on what Ramona and Jordan have already stated, I think it might be difficult to identify one specific issue. And there are very clear situations in incidents of domestic violence and emotional abuse in the home that need to be identified and addressed, but also situations in which that it might not be overt domestic violence or emotional abuse. However, the parties themselves, or I should say parents, cannot communicate effectively with one another, cannot co-parent, and the stressful times that children are already having to adapt to different schooling schedules, not being able to see their friends, not being taken out of their normalcy, can very much affect them, and they can very much absorb all of that negative energy. So my point would be that even in those situations that fall outside of kind of the pro se abuse and violent situations, that we all need to take steps to make sure that we are doing the best to make the situation adaptable for those young and formative minds.
Thank you so much for that, Anthony, because what you're speaking to is that while it may not be classically considered domestic violence, there are stressors that are creating negative patterns of energy in families, and that is having a dramatic impact on our children, correct?
Absolutely correct, Dr. Green.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, and then Marissa.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Marissa Bejarano, And I have the pleasure of being one of the current RISE Fellows in the Urban Leadership Program. My day job is I am a community partnership prosecutor for the San Diego County District Attorney's Office. And our role at the District Attorney's Office has always been to ensure the safety of the entire community. And it's not only through prosecution, but it's also through crime prevention. And so a large part of my job is actually working with the entire community, the school districts, law enforcement, the community-based organizations. And even before the pandemic started, we were looking at ways to help children that were experiencing trauma in the home and outside of the home. And so now we have increased trauma to all these children, and looking at some of the different programs and projects as ways to help mitigate the effects, the negative effects that children might experience.
So the issue is then, how do we develop programming, even in the midst of this, that will help children and families cope better with this circumstance? Am I hearing that?
Right. It's looking at what has been done and how we can pivot during this time to continue to provide that additional support to educators and also to the families themselves.
Thank you very much for that. Now, one of the places that each of you seems to really want to focus, and you made that clear as we prepped for the session, is that whole space of the social and emotional well-being of families. And the listeners also indicated that in the poll, that there is this level of stress that families are experiencing. So can each of you speak to some of this social emotional element and how you see it affecting not only the family, but as Jordan pointed out, it is also affecting not just the child, rather, but also affecting the family. So would each of you like to speak to that, please?
So just in regards to the social emotional impact on families, I mean, we have a lot of families that have lost their job. About 50% of Americans are unemployed right now. And imagine if you have children in your home that you are responsible to take care of, and you don't necessarily have the coping skills because of past trauma, and they're having to really being able to navigate that in this new reality and stay strong for their children, and really to be able to not get the services that they need, even though they have a lot of telehealth models. Think about the vulnerable marginalized communities that don't have insurance. A lot of our undocumented families are unable to get services right now. So it's very difficult for them to navigate, this new normal.
So what you're bringing into this picture is the whole notion of trauma, and we'll talk more about that. Anthony, what are you saying?
What I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis is individuals, families, parents calling in and trying to figure out, what am I supposed to be doing? And I think, it's a very difficult situation for parents and for children. And there's no one best answer. There's no one right answer. We're all doing our best. And that's what we try and follow through with our potential clients, and our clients is indicating, hey, the expectation is you're going to do the best you can as a parent. And those decisions that you're making are going to be okay, because at the end of the day, this is a global pandemic. These are extraordinary times. This is not something that you should have the answers for. You should be reasonable. You should try and work with either the other parent or community-based organizations or the school to get further along, inch by inch, step by step, because that's how we're going to make progress through this.
Okay, but I want to work with that a little bit, Anthony, because if we use what Ramona just talked about, is that even though people are trying to do their best, it's superimposed with other trauma. And Jordan, I know that you want to speak to this as well. So what do we do with the fact that quite often people who are in under-resourced communities like the ones we serve have earlier traumas that are now brought into this collective trauma of the pandemic?
Absolutely. And it's again, I don't think that there is one correct answer. I think the fact that, if we're speaking specifically to immigrant communities, that there may be multi-generational homes, you can rely on family members, you can rely on your traditions, on those things that make us stronger to get through these issues. That's maybe a little bit different than a single parent, right? That maybe doesn't have that network, but maybe needs to, I don't want to say how, take the steps or the courage, but identify that the fact that, hey, I've been doing it on my own and I can't right now. And I know that there are some resources out there So let me reach out. And the one, I should say, silver lining about this, at least what I've seen in the work that we do, is that there are a ton of organizations just stepping up, and there are a ton of community members stepping up. And again, I guess that's sort of where I say in the collective, right? The village, tribe, the pueblo can move us forward. And again, it's unprecedented, and those traumas are still going to be there weighing on us, but we got to do the best we can.
Okay, thank you for that. Jordan, you were going to speak to the same issue.
Yeah, and I think Anthony hit it so well. I think one of the things that I would agree with as well is that some of these situations aren't new. Poverty isn't new. The struggle of classism and social mobility and how your citizenship status impacts your lived experience here are not new. I think what this is really impacting is exacerbating some of the issues and inequities that we are seeing every single day. And so when you're thinking about a house, you're thinking about a family worrying about unemployment, possibly citizenship status. Do I have food? Now I have family in the house. Like Anthony talked about, intergenerational families, you're having all this and it's in one space and you can't go anywhere. And so it feels like your place that is supposed to be a home where hopefully there's laughter, which there probably still is, and there still is, it's also a place where it just feels like it just stays there. And I think when I see a lot of my students, the things that they're struggling with is that they see it every day. They wake up and it's not changing. They go to bed and they might hear some frustrations in the household, and it's all in there. So I think it's this intersectional type of oppressions that are just sitting at home that you have to kind of cope with and deal with. And I think, as Anthony mentioned, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer to all of them, as every household might need a different level of support or engagement or partnership to get to their needs.
Okay, but you're going to have to break that down. Intersectional oppression? I mean, come on.
Well,
Okay, come on.
Yeah, we're pretty much just looking at how are the systems, if you think of like a system of race, a system of class, like how are these things kind of impacting our ability to exist? So for example, if we think about citizenship, race, and class, how is that impacting a lived experience of an individual? We can break that down really deep, Dr. Green, but keeping it very simple, it's just looking at how are different systems at play impacting our ability to exist, and how is that trauma showing up because of different levels of oppressions that we're experiencing every single day.
And you're saying all of that's happening at the same time?
Right at home.
Okay, very good. Wow, so Marissa, you have a lot to do in terms of keeping the entire community safe.
Well, you know what I want to add is that I think when you see groups like Reality Changers, and actually our office as well, we have a mentoring program that is based in part on restorative practices and dealing with the social emotional support for children. I think the importance of those programs is even more so now than it was before the pandemic. And one thing that we have been trying to do is to see how can we reach those kids that we were mentoring while they're not in school. Can we create a virtual mentoring program so that we can still be in contact with them and still, check in with them, ask them, how are they doing? What was difficult about today or this week, and really try to support those children socially and emotionally.
Well, one of the things that we had a panel on last week, they were saying, but some of those children are the hardest to reach. They have a computer, but they may not have internet. So we've done a wonderful job of distributing the device, but recognizing the connectivity issues and things like that, then continues to exacerbate the kind of intersectional oppression that Jordan just related, that those are the kids that are most vulnerable. How do we reach them?
I think that's where it takes the entire community, and I think Ramona will probably say this as well, but one of I think our most important task is to be the eyes and ears of those children. And when you look at the statistics here from San Diego in terms of the decline in child abuse reporting, where we had over 800 reports from schools in 2019. In April of 2019, we are down to just over 100 in April of 2020. So it's a significant decline. And I think, we know that teachers are checking in maybe with a phone or remotely with, some sort of Zoom like this, but, I don't think it's enough. And,
yes. So I want to work with that because you brought in the data. And of course, Ramona, I know that you're going to have the data on this. So I'm about to come to you, but I want to do with the intersection of two things. Because Ramona, the fact that we have this decline in reporting, you said at the very beginning, does not necessarily mean that we're not having kids that are being abused right now. And Anthony, you're saying that, and before we started, is that we're seeing different kinds of expression of domestic violence, and that domestic violence reporting is actually on the increase. So I'm trying to understand how this is the case. So Ramona and Anthony, first you, Ramona, give us the data and then sort of speak to this dilemma that we're facing.
So as I said before, 50% of domestic violence reporting nationally, the national hotline, have gone up, but it's gone down 50% or more now, and especially over the last couple of months, and it's continuing to decline. People are just not seeing and calling these kids, calling in on these kids, and it's unfortunate because, and even in the community, it's one thing that I've noticed as a social worker and a researcher that within a community, people don't want to call on other people because they themselves maybe have experienced systems in a very negative way, and because of all of their experiences, even if they see something that may not be something that they would do themselves or that is concerning, they don't want to call because they themselves feel like they're already oppressed, they're already going through a lot. Well, I don't want to put that on another family. So it's very unfortunate that, this is the situation that families are in right now.
So there's another systemic issue. So the perceptions of the system may keep people, like a neighbor knows that some kid is being abused, but they're not going to call that in because of their own experiences with the system.
Yeah, so we have a unique opportunity to be able to engage and see families and kids. So particularly when, like San Diego School District, they put out a call to the teachers saying, if you have an opportunity, if you do have children who have connectivity and have internet, to, ask them, how are you doing? What's one thing that you're doing? Or if they're not, if they haven't heard from them and they're not turning in their homework, check on them. Or, find out some way to call, to check in on them in some way. So we have opportunities. We're just not putting them together with the safety of children right now. And it's important.
Okay, but I want to work with another piece of this. Then how is it that we have this increase in reports of domestic violence? And what are the implications of that? Anthony, please.
I think this is an amazing, demonstration of the macro and maybe the micro level where, Ramona has access to expansive, amounts of information. And when I say I see an increase, I mean it on the ground level. We have partnerships with the Family Justice Center. We have partnerships with the YWCA. And we have been doing consults, buy-in through those organizations, teleconsults, buy-in through a neighbor or a friend when perhaps the perpetrator of the domestic violence isn't at the home and they come and they say, hey, it's 10:33. I need to speak with you. Can you consult with me? And we'll jump on an evaluation and we'll get there. We've been, access to the Family Law Facilitator's Office, which is the agency in the courthouse that assists per litigants in drafting the actual documents is almost nil at this point. So we're doing that on a pro bono level. We're helping people just get the documents done if necessary. So when I say I've seen the uptick, I mean it on the micro level on the phone calls that we're getting right now. They're not necessarily, it's custody and visitation and it's incidents of domestic violence. It's not divorce. It's not, hey, I need to, get a title or a lien on anything like that. It's really, those are the two major issues right now. And those obviously relate directly down to the children in the residence, the children that are really suffering.
And so there's a trickle down to the children that we're not.
I think that's important.
Well, go ahead, please.
There's always been a divide between child welfare and domestic violence. Even though we work kind of in the same space, domestic violence agencies in that camp have always believed, let's keep families together. So, and then child welfare, of course, traditionally, people see us as wanting to take children out of the home. So even though they're calling the national hotline, they can call anonymously. They really are hurting and they're scared and domestic violence is up. But they're not going to call if they don't have the information to report, even though it's mandated now and it's a law. You're not going to have the same amount of calls. So that can kind of explain the increase and decrease at the same time, because we're not getting those calls because people are not feeling that they want to, again, impact families with our system.
Well, I want you to know that the chat and the questions are already getting hot. So I'm going to pulled in some of what's coming there, because Jordan and Marissa, I'm coming right at you with where the chat and the questions are going. So Jordan, in addition to the challenges that young people are going to have in terms of employment, because they have to provide for their family, and then the trajectories in terms of college, there's also this issue of cybersecurity. That the children are in danger in a different kind of way. And then Marissa, what we know is that, I hate to say it, that we're seeing increases in violent crime, especially, in terms of, person-to-person crime. So how do we then sort of square these kinds of issues? So Jordan first, how do we address some of this?
Yeah, as we've been adjusting our program to go all virtually, and hearing some of the things that our students and families were struggling with, one of the things we quickly realized was that it's not just enough to reach out to the students and make sure that they're set on their front, but to also set up parental and guardian supports. So things on cybersecurity, what is online learning, things like Google Classroom, Power School, all those type of like online technologies. And so one of the things that we learned was one way that we can also create safety in the house is having the families as a whole learn what does cyber safety look like? And so that looks like putting on virtual sessions for families and also having an open forum as a trusted community partner to say, if you have questions, let us know.
You need to move around a little bit more there, Jordan. So, but I want to work with that. I'm coming to you in a second, Marissa. But the point that you just made at the end there, Jordan, I really want to stay with that. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to press you a little bit. There are people that are in the chat that are saying that's all fine and good, but the basic right to the internet is an issue first. And these are often the same families. So how are we going to address those two? You're the one that said intersectional oppressions. This is part of the intersectionality.
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Dr. Green. I think someone mentioned it too. This is also a time for us to look at how do we not just rebuild a system, but transform it. So what does that mean in terms of like policy advocacy, working with elected officials, which might have a longer timeline, because I think you have to work in the now and the coming. And so for right now, one of the things we're looking at is how do we sustain our families in this very moment where we aren't just going to get Wi-Fi overnight, while simultaneously understanding that we need to be advocates for policy that's going to be equitable so that we don't have to have this issue on a systemic level.
Okay, so we agree about that, but I have to then deal with this issue of violent crime. So Marissa, are you seeing that? Is that anecdotal or is that a real issue that we're running into?
So what I've seen down here in the South Bay community is that there has been an increase in the domestic violence calls. And in fact, unfortunately, we had a murder as a result of a domestic violence incident that occurred down here. So yes, in terms of the domestic violence increase, we have seen that. And, there was a question earlier about, well, why are we seeing an increase in domestic violence calls and not an increase or the same type of reporting for child abuse? And, I think that they are different. In domestic violence cases, you have, a partner group with, violence between in that relationship, and it gets to a point where there is a domestic violence, and generally you have the victim calling in. It's not a third party that's calling in to report the domestic violence. And in contrast with the child abuse, what you see is that a large part of a large group of reporters of child abuse are actually school officials. And so without that in-person contact between the child and the teacher, or the child and a counselor or an administrator, you have a significant decline. You also have children that are being isolated from, their religion. So whether that be, teachers at a church or community-based organizations, sporting teams, etc. So you have a whole group of individuals that are no longer interacting with children.
So let's add this to the larger issue of detainees and immigrants. This is also something that your office is dealing with, Marissa, as well, or is that something that you don't touch?
We don't touch on the federal immigration. No, we are state and local.
Okay, but you are aware of the kinds of issues that we're talking about, where there are also issues of children who are in those kinds of circumstances. So perhaps Ramona, you know something about that and how that's being managed, or perhaps Anthony? I'm calling on you, Ramona, and if you don't know it, it's all good.
Oh, it's okay. Just on a cursory level, because, if we have children that are left or brought across, through immigration, we may have to intervene in that respect. But during this COVID time, that hasn't risen to the point where we're talking about it on a daily basis. We're having a lot more issues with other things, which I'll let him answer, and then we'll get back to that.
Okay, so Anthony, what do you know about that part in terms of the immigrant and refugee populations?
Absolutely. Again, on a cursory level, I won't sit here and present myself as somebody that's boots on the ground, but the fact that it is federal, the fact that the administration has the power to execute executive orders and throw things into an uproar almost overnight or immediately has only made a bad situation worse. I know that there are multiple organizations out there campaigning, doing the best they can, doing demonstrations, protests, to try and affect some kind of change, to create public pressure, to create a tide, to effectuate change for those children that are in fact suffering on a day-to-day basis. And it's necessary, and we all should contribute and assist in that movement, because it's not just the children that we have in our communities, it's the children regionally, nationally that need that support.
So what we recognize is that there are many vulnerable families in these situations, and that's where you started off, Jordan. You talked about the vulnerability to the entire family. Can you speak more to that, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's something kind of as Ramona and Anthony was speaking to on the cursory note of just seeing families working through systems like unemployment for the first time, how that's impacted for some of our families that might be undocumented, and what does that mean for them. It's really impacting families when students are not used to seeing their guardians, their mom or whoever at home, and now they're home all the time. And so it's almost like a rewiring of relationships. It's re-understanding, how do we communicate, what does our day look like, and then how is it all being impacted with inside one home at a time.
And then Ramona, this is the kind of thing that you're seeing also, no doubt, in terms of child and family services.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, parents typically aren't used to being around their children. Even in the summer, they're involved, as Marissa said, in sporting events, they're involved in other activities. Parents are working. They've put them into a situation and kind of like this pot, and like crabs in a pot, they'll jump on top of each other trying to get out of the heat, right? But there's nowhere to go. They're asking us to shelter at home. They're impoverished. They have a lot less resources, available to them. And we're talking about children that don't have access to things like video games or even other things to learn with, right? And then parents are more stressed, particularly if they have special needs kids, to even teach them some of the subjects. And they didn't learn the way that the children are learning. So that becomes another point of frustration, because they feel prideful and embarrassed, and that comes out sometimes as anger because of transgenerational trauma. So all these different things, as Jordan said earlier, the intersectionality of what that looks like in a home that may have domestic violence, substance abuse, mental health issues, it's just a very, very, critical situation that can go on in homes right now. Volatile situation. That's what I was thinking of.
Volatile situations, indeed. And, one of the notes that we're having in the chat here is that the stress levels are really uprooting the routines in the families. And, Marissa, I want to talk to you about that, because you opened by saying that your office is really looking at ways to really support the entire community, the health and well-being of the community. And I imagine a lot of families who have these children are feeling extremely vulnerable. You spoke to the restorative justice aspects of this and checking in with the children. Are there other thoughts that you have about how do we protect the community and thereby protect these children?
So yes, one program that we have been implementing here in the San Diego County is called Handle with Care. And that is not a program that we developed on our own, but it's a program that started in West Virginia. And that program started as a result of the ACEs study and looking at, the trauma that children are living with and how many children are exposed to trauma, and said, what can we do? And this is one of the programs that resulted. And the way that the program works is that when police officers respond to an incident, to a home where there are school-age children present, and they believe that that child, this would have been a traumatic incident for them, then the police officer simply sends a message to the school and to the school district that says, handle with care. And the idea is to provide, to let the teachers know, because many of these teachers, the students come to school the next day and, they've experienced trauma. And now we don't have that situation right now. These notices are, right now, this program is only being implemented down here in South Bay at the Chula Vista Elementary School District and with the Chula Vista Police Department. But the notifications during the pandemic are still being sent. So teachers, even though they're not in the classroom, will still receive this notification saying handle with care. And the school district also receives the message so that they can provide additional support to the student, whatever that additional support may be like. It may just, be, contacting the student, asking them how they're doing. The idea is not to pry into the actual incident. No confidential information is shared with the teacher or the school, but it's just to allow the teacher to have that information that some traumatic incident happened with this child, and this child does need additional support, whatever that might be.
And so that's something that we can look at doing virtually as well. That's what you're suggesting.
Yes. Well, it is happening virtually right now. My wish, my dream would have been that every school would have had this program in place so that teachers could at least have that heads up, but I think that, I'll still continue to try with the school districts that, they're dealing with distance learning. How do we get distance learning going? And this is something that's, on top of those already difficult responsibilities.
It is a challenge on top of that, because we also have the courts that are backed up. We have the difficulty of developing routines. And so, Jordan, developing routines. How can you help families develop routines? There's a person who's asking about that you're familiar with. And so how do we go about doing that?
I saw that person say develop routines. I think one of the first things to acknowledge is that for caregivers, caretakers, guardians, students, it's a heavy time. Everything might not be perfect. Every child in the house might not do everything perfectly, but I think setting up some type of structure. I mean, there's some things that were going online about here's a typical day that can happen, but also being okay and giving yourself that grace where if the routine doesn't work at 9:05 every day, they're washing their hands and right on the screen, being okay with that. I think what this pandemic has really taught us about routines is that they're great for our sense of control, but in this place, we need to be able to extend ourselves grace. We need to be able to extend ourselves grace to our students, to ourselves, to our routines. And that doesn't mean we give up on everything, but it's being able to adjust accordingly as you're seeing your students and those in your house respond to what's working, what's not working, and doing what's best for your household.
Oh, so you're saying that, just because I'm stressed out, I can't impose on my kid that they have to follow their routine.
No, I'm saying too, it's the idea of handling with care. I think giving ourselves grace and giving our children grace as well in the house might be something we can look into, leading with empathy, even for our young folks. If they don't get every assignment okay, that's okay. We're working through this together and really understanding that this is uncertainty that's across the entire family.
And I will talk to you when you have 2 teenagers in your house. Just
yeah,
like
see, the two things, I don't have children, so I'm speaking from prayer and my brother's experiences.
But Anthony, there are all kinds of issues going on as well in terms of the courts. What kinds of things are you seeing? Because the courts aren't open right now.
Absolutely. Since March 16th or 17th, the courts have been closed. What we have heard, at least as San Diego County is concerned, is that May 26th is the date, right? The Tuesday after Memorial Day. And everyone is ready and raring to go to get back into court and to prove a point. And the issue is that since March 17th, over 10,000 family law cases have to be rescheduled and reheard. The court receives over 1,000 pieces of correspondence in the mail, which they have not touched since March 17th. So the court opening those doors doesn't mean you're in there the first day, right? We're still in this situation where we have to, again, give ourselves grace, just like Jordan, hit the nail on the head, give our children grace, give our co-parent grace, because we are not going to have an opportunity to be in front of a judge likely for months, 120 to 180 days at least, And then on top of that,
what did you just say to me? What did
yes.
you just say to me? I am already tired of living with this person and I have to wait another 120 days.
Well, no, not necessarily in a situation the parents are living together, right? Let's say where the parents have already been separated, but there are existing custody and visitation orders, right? Which is still a difficult situation, co-parenting in and of itself. But COVID has resulted in an escalation between parents, right? The zero-sum game
Yes.
where they're trying to outdo each other for extra time rather than focusing on, again, establishing a routine, establishing something where they can rely on one another to care for the children, right? And going back to the courts specifically, this has been an impetus, and we talked about the use of technology. We will not gain physical access to the courthouse when they open on the 26th. They are going to institute video hearings. They will be instituting e-filing for family law, which did not exist. It's going to be an entirely new system, which attorneys, judges, staff, and pro se litigants are all going to have to learn. So in and of itself, that's a whole other ballgame. It's a whole other group of stressors. So long story short, it's going to be rough out there, even when we get a chance to get to court. So let's try and all work together the best we can in a situation where it's appropriate to avoid that trauma and that stress, if at all possible.
Okay, so Ramona, you have to help us fix all of this. And I'm being halfway serious because what we're dealing with is a number of issues all at the same time. Child and family services are going to be right at the nexus point of a lot of this. We're talking about giving ourselves grace on one hand, but on the other hand, the reality is that this stress, this trauma that people are experiencing, they're going to want some kind of relief, some kind of direction. So for all of you, but I'm going to start with Ramona, we need to begin to give folks that are listening to us some sense that this has some direction, some purpose, some focus. And what might that be?
I think, like Jordan and Anthony said, I think leading with empathy and having grace is important because we're already aware, particularly for families of color that are coming back into the system. Maybe some of them had just recently reunified with their children, and because of all of this stress and everything that's going on, they may get their children removed again. So we're keeping that in mind and really trying to be understanding and provide resources and wrap around families with resources and give them the services they need to stabilize them, given that we understand the implications and impact that COVID has had on our families. So I think it's important for us, even as a child welfare system, and I'm talking about the United States in general, right, to really understand and walk into a home knowing that that story has been impacted by this pandemic. And I think that that's very important.
But wait a minute, there are norms that people have about what acceptable behavior. And are you saying that we have to give grace around that given the pandemic? That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. I think that, in San Diego, they use something called safety organized practice. LA County is the only county that doesn't use it. However, it's the same practice. I was on an initiative called California Partners for Permanency that looked at disproportionality of kids. So we helped to craft that policy. But in that, it says to give an opportunity for the family to share their story, to tell us what happened. So, you have to go slow to go fast. So if you listen to the families, you can't impact the child welfare system, just like they're trying not to impact the healthcare system in this COVID era, right? So you can't just go and, oh my gosh, all this is going on. Now we see the families see something, say something, we're going to take all these kids. We have to say, we have to look at it from a spectrum perspective. What happened? Look at that behavior. Can it be corrected? Was it something that was temporary or is it something that was ongoing? Is it going to be long-term? And what is the safety factor for these families and these children?
So there's a larger context that has to be considered. So this is where I want to turn to you, Marissa, because we have a hot question here where it says, the program that you're describing is fantastic on one hand, but we have social historical elements in San Diego in terms of North County, South of the 8, whereas the imposition of north of the 8 values on south of the 8 experience. And so how do we make sure that in this emergence, when it does come, that we are really dealing with those systemic issues that Jordan talked about earlier?
In terms of, is our intent to make this county-wide, which means, north of the 8 as well, and treating I mean, that is our plan. Is we are working on this program in collaboration with the San Diego County Office of Education. And so they have been our partner in really going out to the school districts and, letting them know about the program, what its goals are, and how really what this is meant to be is to provide support to children. That's what this is all about. And so even though there may be areas that, have systematically, been the locations where police are patrolling, et cetera, we still want to provide that support to those children. That's the idea behind this, is that if there are, inequities there, then this isn't meant to, harm the children in any manner or point them out or signal them out or anything like that. The entire purpose behind the program is to provide support, whatever support may look like for that individual child. It may not be, it might just be the teacher being a silent observer when class is in session as normal. Or it might, giving the child a break. If say the police responded to a home at 2:00 in the morning and the child's at school the next day, and they're there at school and they're tired, they haven't done their homework, and the teacher gets this notification. It's a teacher saying, you know what, you don't have to take the test today, or you know what, do you want to go lay down for a little bit in the nurse's office? So we're talking about simple things that we are hoping teachers and school officials can do just to provide additional support.
And what I love about what you're saying is that it is really focused on the children, and that's the ideal state. And yet we have people who are observing right now and writing into us that are tying into what Ramona said earlier, is that there are concerns about the experiences with the system. And so that is probably an entire other conversation that we don't have time to do now. But I really appreciate what you're offering, is that ultimately this is about the children.
Right.
Now, Jordan and Anthony, okay, it's time for you to come up with your call to action here, because, okay, this is all fine and good, but we have people here that say, okay, what are we going to do? Okay, so I can see, Jordan, you're getting ready. Anthony is already ready. And so, Anthony, so what are we going to do?
What are we going to do? Yeah, I understand very well the notion of, systemic failure, of frustration, of disappointment, having doors shut in your face over and over. I also understand, and I think that this panel is demonstrative of the fact that there are people working in every area. We have, the law enforcement portion, the legal portion, the community-based youth organization, child welfare services that care about you as a person, because we're supposed to. So what I would ask, my call to action, is to support individuals, support agencies that are out there on the ground trying to do these things, whether it's, volunteering, obviously COVID, being what it is, it's limiting, but doing everything you can, having an open heart, open ears, open mind, and assist in any way you can, because it's the little things. When every door has been closed in your face, even a small demonstration of support, of effect, of assistance, is going to matter the world to somebody. It's going to matter the world to a family or to a child.
Anthony, you're dealing with me. So be specific. Be specific. Give me one nugget. I need to take something with me. One thing.
Okay. I will say empathy is of the utmost important, especially when considering either your own children, children of others, or any family that is in a precarious position.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Anthony. Okay, Jordan, you're on next. Call to action here.
Yes, sir. I think simply COVID has given us an opportunity to kind of recreate and reimagine systems. And I think it's on us to really pressure and to change things to make it more equitable. And so I think for me, I would ask us to first take an assessment of yourself and see what do you have the capacity to do, and to lean into that, but to do it in coalition. I would say figure out who you could partner with, figure out who's already doing the work, who's already working towards it. If you care about changing grades, if you care about making equitable type of virtual learning for different people, figure out people you can partner with and go after it now, deemed off of what is your capacity in this season. Like I said, as I'm not a parent, I know parents are overworked, teachers are feeling stressed out. If you're stressed out, honor that, take a step back. But when you feel you have the capacity to lean in, find a coalition and make the impact you can make.
I like the idea of coalition. I like the idea of leaning in. I really support all of that. But in Reality Changers, it's about getting those children ready to lead, getting those children ready for college, having strong internships and things of that sort. What do you tell that kid right now? Because they're trying to figure out, I don't want to deal with this online thing. I haven't seen my friends for weeks. What do you tell that 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old? Those kids are having a different kind of experience, and those are the folks that you work with. What do you tell them?
Yeah, there's three things we're focusing on now in this season that we work with our students. It's a sense of security, connectedness, and hope. The last one is kind of the one it sounds like you're talking with, and we don't try and give any like okey doke hope. We sit down with them and tell them about the reality that this is hard. And to be honest with you, we don't have all the answers. Some of our work is walking with them and saying, we don't know when this is going to end, but we're going to walk with it through you. We're going to tell you your options, and we're going to kind of co-collaborate and figure out what are the best options for you and your family. And so we tell them, our saying is tough times never last, but tough people always do. So we will them through, but also tell them if you need to take a step back, that's okay too, but we're going to get you to the next line, whatever that is for you.
Even though I have to do this job so that my family can sort of like make it, even though their rent is deferred for, 30, 60 days, I just have to cope with that right now if I'm one of these teenagers.
But Dr. Green, I would just say, I know Jordan's working to get those kids to college. And the question is what will that university system do? How can we make sure that our kids who are, some of them are first generation kids getting to college.
Yeah.
What do you want the university to do? Do you want them to give them a different opportunity to apply? Do you want to give them, what is it that you are asking? What would you advocate for them to do for our kids?
To provide them an experience that's meaningful, that's equitable, and that gives them the quality of content in a way that's accessible for them. We can understand, and we have to understand that if they can't be on campus, that's okay. Then maybe your tuition and fees need to go down, and we need to make sure that the funding and accessibility for students is there as well. So don't overcharge them, don't give them a loan that's gonna mess them up for years to come, and figure out how you don't have to put them in debt in order to have access to a quality education.
Okay, there we go. Okay, and Tony Young never jumps into this, but no, he wanted that one specific. Marissa, okay? So they're coming after your program. Your program is going to work. You've talked about restorative justice. You've talked about making sure that those children have this someone who can say to them, there may be an issue here. Okay, so what else? What is another call to action, Marissa?
I think another call to action is just asking people to reach out to, to partners that they maybe hadn't thought would ever be a partner, like us, like the district attorney's office, because like I said, we are really, we work hard on the prevention piece. And I don't think a lot of people know that, we don't want to always just be reactive. We want to be proactive and look at what can we do to disrupt the school to prison pipeline. And a lot of it is, how can we mitigate the effects of trauma on these kids? And so we've worked on these different programs like implementing restorative, practices in the schools and the handle with care. But we want you to reach out to us. We have, I saw in the chat a lot of questions about cybersecurity. That's something that we were going out regularly and speaking to parents about. And so we have the presentation, we have the tools. I think like what has been mentioned, it's going to be difficult because some of the parents that we want to reach to explain, what to be looking out for, they might not even have access to internet. They might have a device, but they might not have all the tools that they need in their toolbox to even protect their children. So, but we are here and we're ready to help and to, like I said at the beginning, protect and provide for the safety of our community in whatever way that we can.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And then Ramona, you're going to get the final word here. Because what is it that is a call for action? We have one of the questions saying, we have the teachers and they're doing a wonderful job, but they're under stress as well. No doubt Child and Family Services is under stress. So what is that ultimate call for action?
I think kind of like piggybacking on what everyone else has said, it's important to create those partnerships, and partnerships, as Marissa said, with people that you may not think of. A lot of people don't think about partnering with faith-based communities, with community-based organizations. How can we go out into the community? Because, you know, you shouldn't do anything with before the community, without the community. So,
Yes.
you know, have those focus groups, have those town halls, bring people together and ask them, what do you need? And how can we work together to meet those needs? So I think that's important.
Okay, very good. So Anthony Medina, in one breath, what is it that we need to do?
I said it earlier, we lead with empathy. We care for one another. We work as the pueblo, as the tribe, as a village, as a community, and we're gonna get through it. We just gotta look out for one another.
Okay, Brandon, no, I'm sorry, Jordan, in one breath, what do we need to do?
Take care of ourselves and take care of each other.
Thank you very much. Marissa, one breath, what do we need to do?
Educate.
Wonderful. Okay, and Ramona, one breath, what do we need to do?
Have understanding.
Wonderful. With that, I want to thank you so much, panel. This has been lively, to say the least. And what you've really done is not only spoken from the heart, you've spoken directly to the challenges that we have around child welfare. We only touched on a few of these issues because there are issues that are still there in terms of foster care and homeless. We have deeper questions around exploitation, cybersecurity, and trafficking. We're looking at the social, historical, intersectional issues of trauma that are impacting all of our children. We're having the reduced reporting of this child abuse, but then there may be ways that we can prepare ourselves, and then we're going to have this backlog in the courts. And then we also need to think about our children as they prepare for college. What are the kinds of things that we need to think about differently? So again, thank you so much for that. And with that, we're going to turn things over to Tony Young.
Thank you, Dr. Green, and always we really appreciate your leadership and specifically moderating this series on COVID-19 and its impact on urban communities. And the panel was amazing. I just love the fact that we had a combination of folks who work with large bureaucracies and really engaging with large groups of people, and then you have nonprofits that are dealing with these individuals on the ground level every day. And then you have folks from the bureaucracies who actually are grassroots in nature. And that's really what this organization supports and is about. So thank you all for listening. We appreciate that. And what we're going to do every week is have another issue that we'll talk about. And this is documenting what's happening in this community, and this is historic in many ways. So we appreciate the people who have participated. It looks like we had a lot of people participate, and we appreciate your questions and answers. And with that, I believe that there's a survey that we're going to go over. And if you get a chance, take a look at that survey and make sure you tune in next week.
And Ramona, Marissa, Jordan, Anthony, thank you so much. This has been excellent. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.